Hello and welcome. I'm Geraldine Wilkins, the Living Water Quilter, and this is Quilt Conversations Live. Hello, ladies. I'm so glad that you're here. This is Quilt Conversations Live, and this is the Master Class series. If you're just joining us, we have been going through the 10 steps to Stress Free Machine Quilting. We've been covering 2 steps for the Masterclass series with every live show. Speaking of live shows, this is a premiere. A premiere on YouTube means that this is recorded and then presented to you as a premiere, which means we have a live chat. Guess who's in the chat? Yes, me. So I am live in the chat, but this is a recorded video because I am on vacation. Yes, I am taking a vacation to visit family, and I did not want to leave you hanging. So I am visiting my family, but I am live with you for this premiere so we can continue our series in the Master Class series. So, what are we covering tonight? Let's take a look. Let me put that up on the screen again. The 10 steps to stress-free machine quilting. We've gone through fabric preparation, piecing accuracy. We looked at pressing methods, batting selection, and last week, or I should say 2 weeks ago, we talked about basting and quilt stabilization. So tonight, we're going to talk about designs and how densely we quilted with that design, our quilt project. And we're going to talk about how we place a design in a quilt once we have selected the design. Now, you may remember the last time I mentioned that the density of our quilting has a lot to do with our batting selection. So with some battings, we have to stitch a certain distance. We only can stitch up to 3 inches apart or 8 inches apart or 10 inches apart. Our design selection will be influenced by the batting choice that we make. That will influence the density of the quilting, because if we can quilt 8 inches apart, that means we can leave 8 inches of space where there's no quilting. But if we have to stitch no more than 3 inches apart, that means we have a lot more stitching in our quilt when we have to stitch with a minimum, or should I say maximum of 3 inches apart between stitching. We don't want it to be more than 3 inches apart if that's what the batting instructions say, right? So you want to consider that. Let's talk about, from the beginning, the 10 steps. If you're just joining me, I will go through it quickly. And ladies who are in the chat, share with us the steps that you are working on to improve, to learn about. Are you trying to get better at fabric preparation? Maybe you want to improve your pressing methods. Maybe you're testing different pressing methods. Maybe you are trying to learn more about batting. What's your favorite batting? In the chat, let us know where you are in the 10 steps and what areas that you really are confident in or ones that you need to work on. I'm going to do a recap very quickly for those who are new. When we talk about fabric preparation, it's all about preparing the fabric for the entire quilting process. When we pre-wash and starch our fabric, we're preparing it to be cut accurately. That means the fabric is not loosey-goosey, so that when you cut it, it doesn't stretch. That's why I like to use starch, because I can have a nice somewhat stiff fabric. You know, it's not, like cardboard, but it's not going to be loosey-goosey. I don't know how else to describe it. Maybe you have a better term. But that also influences when we piece. When we cut the fabric, we can use templates for cutting accuracy. We can use great rulers, especially for specific patchwork pieces like you see here. So we want to be able to do accurate cutting by preparing the fabric, starching it. It helps us pin and piece better. We get better results. And if you haven't tried starch, I recommend you just test. All the techniques that I share that I do personally for the results that I want, if you haven't tried it, I recommend you try it. See if it's for you. If it's not, move on to the next tip, okay? So once we have accurate piecing, all of our blocks to make the quilt top are all the same size, 8.5 inches, 10.5 inches, 12.5 inches, whatever it is. The unfinished block is now ready to be put together in a pattern like you see here, because we have taken time to prepare the fabric, cut it accurately, and we have prepared our machine for accurate piecing. We have either a piecing foot to help us, or we adjust our needle position so that we get that 1/4 inch seam allowance or scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Follow the pattern instructions to know which seam allowance you need for a particular pattern. After that, we want to, whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let me move this out of the way. All right, so now we have to start thinking about quilting it, right? We have selected a batting. Say your favorite batting is cotton batting or wool batting, right? And it has a minimum distance, and you know what that is. And now you can start thinking about what design you want. But we also have to consider thread, which we will talk about in detail in a couple of weeks. But I will consider the thread also for the pattern. Does the quilting pattern require backtracking? If there's backtracking, meaning stitching over the previous stitches, some free motion quilting patterns do not work well with, say, variegated thread, where the color of the thread fluctuates and changes, right? So we want to consider our thread. Do we want contrasting? Do we want blending thread? Once we have selected our thread and we think about our free motion quilting pattern, one of the things that I want to talk to you about before I show you the next image, let me go back to this view. One of the things that will influence what quilting pattern we use is based on what skill level we are, what tools we have. So, one, what tools do you have? Can you stitch in the ditch with a walking foot? Maybe your machine didn't come with a walking foot. That's one of the first things we learn as quilters, is to quilt our projects with a walking foot. And if that's where you are, you learn how to use the walking foot to get different results. And there are many beautiful things you can quilt with the walking foot. You want to explore that, not just stitch in the ditch. That's one pattern, right? You can also stitch by the ditch. You can do a 1/4 inch on either side of the seam to create a pattern. You can stitch on a diagonal from one corner of the quilt to the other and then subsequently quilt all the way out. You can do a cross hatch with the walking foot. Those are some, or just match stitch quilting. A lot of ladies love, and especially modern quilters, love match stick quilting. How many of you, let us know in the chat, quilt your projects with a walking foot. Have you ever used a walking foot? That's a great place to start, right? So your pattern that you choose can be based on your tools. One, you have a walking foot. If you want to venture into other techniques like free motion quilting or ruler quilting, those are tools and skills you will need to purchase and learn. And there's a process for all of these tools, right? The walking foot, learning how to use it properly, learning how to use a free motion foot and setting up your machine for that. And the same thing with ruler quilting. You need the right foot for that, and you need to learn the skill. So, selecting a pattern will be based on your particular skill. And as you develop your skills, you can always combine walking foot with free motion. You can combine free motion with ruler quilting. You can combine ruler quilting with walking foot quilting. So you want to slowly, over time, build your skills. So with free motion quilting, which is, I think, the next step for most quilters, we learn, what's the first pattern we learn with free motion quilting? I think for many of us, it is either stippling or some call it a meander, where you just stitch in a curvy, wiggly pattern over the surface of a quilt. And I think that is a fantastic skill, beginner free motion skill to learn. And there's so many things you can do with a meander, right? You can meander across a quilt and not show where it begins or where it ends. Or you can follow a pattern with a meander. Instead of it being a straight line crosshatch, it could be a meander crosshatch. Have you thought of that? I want to show you some examples, okay? Let me show you some examples. I'm going to go to my overhead camera. This is a meander. And many of us are familiar with a meander like this or this one. This is not so tight. This is denser, more stitching. This has less stitching. Look at these two. This one, this meander goes in a line back and forth. You can clearly see that there is a direction to this meander. What about this one? This meander goes in a circle and then comes out. It's a spiral, right? So you can meander in different ways and use this to help you build your skills in free motion quilting. Take time to expand your meander patterns by following different pattern lines. Do a spiral, do a linear, meaning going back and forth. But guess what else you can do? Let's take a look at this. Here is a crosshatch that's diamond shaped. And you can mark this on your quilt with your favorite marking tool or use painter's tape. And you just go along the line. Instead of it being a straight line, it's a tight meander, right? So I did this, let's see, continuously. I started over here and I went down and I came up, went across, went down this way, back. So you figure out what stitching path you want. And this is a meander, but it's a crosshatch with a diamond shape. Let's take a look at another example. Look at this one. The meander can be a long, wide meander or a tight meander. Look at this one where it's more squares, but because it's a meander, you get a very different look. This is also a crosshatch like the previous one, but a diamond-shaped crosshatch. This is also meander, but it's following a zigzag line across. So you can still meander across your quilt, but make the meander follow a pattern. This is a zigzag pattern. You can divide the space with the meander. This is meander with lines that are squiggly. This is all meander or stippling, right? And we're going in two directions to create this crosshatch here and over here. We left this space with a very open, but you can stitch a very tight meander. So hopefully you're getting the idea. There's so many ways that we can take what we know and change it up to get a different look. So if you are in the beginning stages of free motion quilting, you can practice meander by dividing the space and stitching different types of meander. Really tight stitching, looser stitching. Here we put meander in between some straight lines. So here's the walking foot stitching, straight lines, and then in between that we have meander. This is the same as this. What's the difference? Instead of it being vertical, it's on the diagonal rather. The meander is on the diagonal. We have straight lines with walking foot. Then we have meander in between. And you can make this as small or as big as you want. Now we've taken some meandering and we have gone around in a square-like fashion. We've created a frame of meander. I think you're getting the picture, right? So when we're selecting a design based on what level we are, what skill level we are, where we are in our journey with free motion quilting, think of all the ways that you can stitch the pattern that you know. Most patterns can be stitched from top to bottom, left to right, right to left. We can do it in a zigzag. We can do it in a spiral, most designs, right? All right. Speaking of directional designs, what do we do next if we're learning free motion quilting and we have stitched and we have practiced meander? We can lengthen out our meander pattern. Let's go back. And in between the meander, we can add a flower. We can add a star. We can add a butterfly. We can add all kinds of things. We can meander, add a flower. Meander, add a flower, etc. Right? Once we start to branch out into learning other patterns, we can stitch a meander, right? And add a star or an X. This is basically an X with a couple of extra lines, right? Here's our X and then a vertical line in between the X that looks like a star. And that's what that is. And we can stitch this in a straight line, or we can stitch it as a curve and put a star strategically at different places on the curve, right? This same pattern, instead of the stars being here and here, we can put them right here. Stars can be right on the curve instead of on the flat part. So many options. These are stitched vertically. You can do these row by row or column by column. So here's another idea where we can stitch our pattern in a vertical way, right? If we look at this straight line and we have the letter O, 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 right? And in between that, we've taken the same idea of the letter O and we've added the star and put O's at the end of each part of the star. Ladies who are in the alphabet design course, this may look familiar to you. You have been practicing different designs based on the alphabet. And if you haven't, I hope that this will encourage you to do so. So in the alphabet design course, I show you how to make this. So you can easily add your S. This is your S pattern in your course. And now on the S, you're adding an X, right? With an extra line to make it a star. Hopefully you are practicing and you're getting inspiration to start doing more of the design work in the course. Here's another example. We went from meander to now vertical based designs, all based on the alphabet, something we already know. Again, here is the letter O, straight line, letter O, straight line. Then we have some L's or U's or box letters, whatever helps you to move your finger over it for muscle memory. If you need to think of the letter C, the box letter C, then this is a C going one way, now it's going backwards, and the C is going in different directions. And it's just row by row by row, one right after the other. So this was to give you some inspiration about the different types of designs you can add to your quilt. This is edge to edge based on column or row quilting. But a lot of us like to stitch a background fill, something like this. This is bare cloth. There's a video here on my YouTube channel that you can learn how to stitch this out. And this pattern fills the space. You don't know where it begins or where it ends. That is called, for me, a design that has no direction. This design has a direction, meaning it's vertical, or if you turn it this way, it's a horizontal direction, right? But there's really no beginning and end, even though it's at the end of the quilt. This, no beginning, no end, it fills the space. What would be a pattern that has direction? That might be a feather design. The feather plume starts at the bottom and you work your way up, and that has a direction, right? This is another pattern. This is Plume Party. This is another video that's here on the YouTube channel if you want to learn how to stitch this. These are plumes from a feather, but continuous. Can you tell where it started or where it has ended? No. Which is another type, a pattern that you want to be able to learn. So hopefully you are seeing the need to build your skills with machine quilting, right? You want different types of designs that you can put in your quilt. You want designs that are edge to edge, that you can't tell where they start or where they end. You want directional designs that have a beginning and an end. You want designs that are vertical or horizontal to fill a space, and you can use that for borders and sashing, or to stitch right across your quilt, back and forth, right? And you can use stippling in a very unique way, right? So all of that was free motion quilting, right? This will take time to develop. If you start today, if you haven't already, take 1 to 2 patterns every couple of months and just practice. Always use what you know and then add something new. Use the walking foot to create borders and boundaries for the free motion quilting you know. If the quilting that you know is stippling, you add stippling with your walking foot quilting. Okay? What else can we learn? Perhaps you have already ventured into free motion quilting and you're ready to add another technique like ruler quilting. I want to share with you, going back to our example, after I selected thread, I was in a journey to learn more design work with ruler quilting and how to add it to a quilt. So, I always say practice, practice, practice. I want to know in the chat, where are you in your quilting journey? Have you learned how to use a walking foot? Do you want to know more techniques for a walking foot? Are you learning free motion quilting? And where are you in your journey with free motion? Are you a stippler? Are you learning different patterns that go with stippling, like stippling and a flower, stippling and a star? Are you doing other types of free motion quilting, edge to edge free motion patterns where it really fills in the space? Do you want to learn how to stitch feathers? Do you use stencils for free motion quilting? Next, I'd love to know, have you started ruler quilting? When we start to add these skills, we are giving ourselves options so that we can do stippling only in a quilt or stippling in a walking foot. We can add ruler quilting with free motion. We can use a walking foot with ruler quilting. When we add these skills, we are giving ourselves more options. So I was on a journey to give myself more options with ruler quilting. And so I would practice on a fat quarter like you see here. This is a fat quarter, and I wanted to use this new template and stitch some circles with straight lines. So I slowly started adding different parts to this. I started in the center and worked my way out. I put in that spirally curved design in the center. Then I framed it with 2 circles. Then I put some points on the left, the right, the top, and the bottom for a star-like look. So little by little, I just added different elements. There's no right, there's no wrong to it. I was just having fun, right? Learning how to add different elements. When we do that and we experiment, we begin to see what our options are, what we can do, what we can change, what can make it better, what we didn't like. All of that comes into play when we experiment and practice. So once I did this and I said, wow, I like this. How can I put it in a quilt? Here is how it looks in a quilt. Let's take a look. Can you see how that design worked right into this project? It's the same spiral-like design in the center, the 2 circles, and then I put in those echoed points left and right, top and bottom. Hopefully you can see it on camera. You see the step by step process, practice, then adding it into a small practice quilt, portions of a design that I practiced, and then I did straight line echo quilting, which I already know how to do. I added something new. I added something I already know. That is my process for continually adding more design possibilities for my quilting. Okay, so we've gone over designs, knowing what designs we know, which ones we want to learn, and how we can have them work together, knowing that we have to practice those designs. Let's review what we're talking about. If you're just joining us, we are going through the 10 steps to stress-free machine quilting, and we're talking about design and density, how dense we're going to quilt it, and then how we place it in a quilt. Let's look at some examples that I have of quilts that I've quilted with different patterns using the techniques that I know: walking foot, free motion, and ruler quilting, and why I selected designs for these particular quilts. Let's take a look. I have, I think, 3 to show you. So let's look at this one. A lot of what we choose has to do with the batting, right? I mentioned that. The purpose of the quilt, our skill level, what techniques we know, and what tools we have. So this is a baby quilt that I designed for Quick and Easy Quilts, Fons and Porter's Quick and Easy Quilts. And I think it's still available if you want to make this pattern. It's a 1-block pattern. It's quick and easy to make, and it's a baby quilt. So I chose wool batting, and I chose a filler design that I love, Bear Claw, and I've learned how to stitch that on a small scale and a big scale. This is my big scale. But I also wanted to create segments, areas for the Bear Claw free motion quilting design. I did some echo quilting. You see the echoes with rulers. Now that could be done with a walking foot. Do you see my stippling on the seam? Look at the star points. I have some wavy lines, that's free motion wavy lines, going across the seams around the star points. I did not want to quilt the star points for this. I wanted that to be an area of softness and cuddle potential for the baby. So no quilting on the star points. But look at how the echo quilting, the 4 straight lines coming off of the star points into the background, that frames the free motion quilting of the Bear Claw. And it provides a accent. It runs right, your eye right to the star. That was the purpose. So what's the next one? Let's take a look at the next. Now this is very different. If you've been here before, you know that I like to challenge myself by making something 3 times. So this is a table runner that I've made 3 times. Same quilt block, but all 3 runners are quilted differently. Look at the difference. There's concentric circles on this one. So the whole table runner is concentric circles. The next table runner has a circular design in the center, but then some really dense free motion quilting around those bars so that the flower in the center really pops out, and so do the bars. Then the last table runner, same quilt block, I did more circles, but I did some overlapping of the circles, and I did a different placement. So all 3 of these table runners have circles in them. And the reason for that is that I challenged myself to stitch circles in every single table runner, but to do it differently, and to add free motion quilting and other techniques like echo quilting to see the difference. The only way that we are going to know when it comes to selecting a design is if we experiment and try different things. Don't be afraid to experiment. There are a lot of times I experiment and I don't like it, right? But I know the more that I try things, the more I learn what I like and what has a higher potential to work. All right, what's next? Let's look at this bed runner. Sometimes the design we choose is based on telling a story. It's not necessarily connected to my skill or my desire to learn something. It's based on what I want to tell a story. it's based on the story I want to tell. I think that's a better way of phrasing it. So for this bed runner, it was about going from fall to winter. So the fabric colors slowly go to this cool blue to represent winter. And so there you have some ruler quilting to represent a snowflake, right? Here in the beginning, I have for the background swirls. That's the wind blowing the leaves. The leaves have very defined free motion quilting for the leaf veins. I guess they're called veins, right? So the quilting on this was based on telling a story about the runner, not about wanting to quilt all circles like the previous runners, right? This bed runner was about fall to winter and using thread to help me tell the story. So that is how we can choose a design. Okay. The next one. This was also designed for a magazine. This is another baby quilt, and it's another quick and easy Fons and Porter design that was published a couple of years ago. And the whole idea was that the center blocks were pieces of candy. So the triangles were stitched to represent the ends of hard candy. You know, when you have hard candy and it's in a wrapper, you have to twist the ends. So all the triangles were stitched with echoed triangles to represent the twisting. And on the inside, I did some spirals to represent the candy being wrapped. And the rest was, you know what? I'm going to stitch some meander and some O's, just going around and around and around. That was my choice for this design. I didn't make it complicated. I just said, okay, I want to do candy wrapper and I want to do some O's and meander. So hopefully now you are a little inspired. If you feel like, wow, that's a lot, I don't have that skill yet, it's okay. It takes time. We are all on our own personal journey. So no matter where you are in your journey, you're just moving to the next step in your journey. So this is an opportunity to figure out where you are and what's next for you for your personal quilting journey. But I think you know that the more skills you have, the tools you have, the more options you have, right? But even if you decide, all I need is meander, and I'm very happy with that. You saw all the designs that you can create with the meander. There are options with the meander to make it as creative and as colorful and as fun as you want, right? Okay, so now what is the next step, at least in my journey, which I want to share with you? The next step for me in helping me to learn how to place designs in a quilt is with ruler quilting, right? And you know that I have designed panels, fabric panels to help me with that. So you have to find what works for you to help you to start learning how to quilt different designs in your quilt projects. Some ladies love to stitch straight lines, and they can do a crosshatch, they can do different types of crosshatch, and do matchstick quilting. All of that works well for them. So one of my classes, ruler quilting classes for beginners, is all about the lines. It's called power lines. And this is the panel for that workshop. So in this workshop, I show you how to stitch different straight line designs. Then we take this panel and we look at the different ways that we can quilt it using an acrylic ruler. Now, of course, you can also quilt this design with a walking foot, right? Because it does a straight line. But here's one design. And just like the table runners, where it was exactly the same table runner and I quilted them with circles, I will take a panel. Most of them are 12 inches square, so it's not a big time commitment. And I will choose one ruler. How can I stitch a different design with that one ruler on the panel? And so I start with what would be the obvious design. And this, I think, would be kind of obvious to do corner to corner stitching and then to do some echo quilting. Fast and easy way to stitch, right? Some of you might say, no, Dina, it's not that easy. Well, it will become easier over time. I believe that you can do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't share it with you. Here is some more straight line designs. It's the same panel, but different quilting, right? It has a different emphasis, different echoes, different type of straight lines. There's some stitch in the ditch going on to accent the pseudo seams. You know, it's a quilt panel, so there aren't any seams in it, right? Let's take a look at the next one. Here's another one with more straight lines similar to the previous, but now the background has some free motion quilting because I can add what I know. I know I want some straight lines, but I can practice a free motion quilting pattern that I want to get better at. And a background is a great way to do that. So for many quilts, I will stitch around the patchwork, and the background, I will stitch one free motion pattern because when I do that, it gives me an opportunity to practice that pattern over and over again on a large quilt. Here is the last one for the power lines. Now, the power lines ruler that we use also has a curved edge. So one edge is straight and the other side is a curve. So I said, let me stitch the same panel with the curved side of the ruler. Very different look, right? Then I put in another free motion quilting pattern in the background. But I did add some straight lines right there in the center, right? They look straight, but they're actually curves. It's a gentle curve. It's not a very deep curve. So for that small space, it almost looks like straight lines. So that is one ruler with a straight line, gentle curve, one quilt panel, quilted in several ways, right? We go from that to this. Then we go to this one. Then this one. This is the first one. Now, what if we decide that we want one panel, but we look at our stash of rulers. We have a few rulers. We've done some practicing. Which ruler pattern? Clamshell, straight edge, circles. Which one will work better with this quilt pattern? You won't know until you try, right? So let's take a look at an example. So here's an example of one quilt panel, another panel that I've designed for my ruler class, and this is stitched with circles and straight lines, and it's stitched on the diagonal instead of vertical or horizontal. Adds a very interesting texture Very different quilting than the power lines. This is edge to edge. It's ignoring the piecing. When you looked at the power lines, the previous panel, we used the patchwork pieces and the different parts of the design to help us with our straight line placement. This one, we're just stitching from one end of the quilt to the other end. We're not using the piecing at all. So that's another way to place patterns in a quilt. Patchwork piecing would be one way, using the patchwork to place a design, or ignoring the patchwork and just going over the whole quilt. Okay? So circles, what's next? I used a clamshell. The quilting is now horizontal, and we have this curve of half circles going through that almost looks like a worm, right? Going across the quilt. It's not very dense, right? But it does add some texture. So this is why I like panels. That way I can see what dense quilting looks like, what diagonal quilting looks like, what certain types of ruler designs look like. This one is very dense. This design is dense, so dense that it helps bring the patchwork, the arrows forward, because it's dense quilting. And this is a wishbone design used with an acrylic ruler. A wishbone design stitched horizontally, row by row, right? Very different look. It's the same panel, but different design. So that's the first one we looked at, which is different from this and different from this one, right? So hopefully you're seeing the difference between what we can do with free motion quilting, with walking foot quilting, and with ruler quilting, and how we can combine those, right, to create different patterns. How we can fill the space or create space for free motion quilting when I showed you the examples of the quilts, and how we can practice learning how to place designs inside of a quilt, right? Using fabric panels. All of those panels are available on my website. And by the way, if you didn't know, right over here, right here, machinequilting.live is my website. It's easier to say machinequilting.live. Most ladies will remember that, and it will go straight to the Living Water Quilter website. You just go to the top tab and you look for shop, and you can find those panels if you want to start practicing. Ladies have been asking for access to the panels for some time, and I finally put it together about a month ago, because normally the panels are only available, they were only available in my classes, and now that has changed because so many of you have asked, can I get that panel? So now they're available if you are interested. Let's look at a recent panel. Many of you may or may not know that I just did a ruler quilting challenge, essential ruler quilting challenge with Bernina. It's still up on the Bernina website. You go to their blog, which is called We All Sew. And it's a ruler quilting challenge with several rulers, a squiggle ruler, a straight edge ruler, and other rulers. There are 4 altogether, where I share 3 designs for each of the rulers, right? And of course, I do what I say. ask you to do, I do it too, right? So after practicing on a small quilt sandwich, the design, I went to a larger quilt sandwich. After I did that, what do you think I did next? You guessed it. I stitched on a fabric panel to see how the designs and techniques I've learned would look on a fabric panel. Let's take a look. Maybe you remember. So here's one of the designs. I took some straight lines and put it on the diagonal. Can you see the repeating techniques that I'm doing from one project to the next? This is helping me to learn and get better at selecting designs, at design placement. Straight lines can be staggered with 1/4 inch echoes, 1/2 inch echoes, 1 inch echoes. So I combined 2 rulers for this, the squiggle ruler design, and some straight lines. So if you are starting to learn a new ruler or free motion quilting technique, you can frame it with straight lines and do a little accent in the project. So that's a ruler from the challenge. And then, of course, one of the first things I did was straight lines. How can I stitch the same panel with straight lines? Using echo quilting. Often with echo quilting, it will be easily stitched if we follow the patchwork. Echo around the patchwork and see where it leads you. And in this case, the echoes that are on the ends were created because of the way the patchwork runs. This pinwheel design is now echoed in the echo quilting. How many of you ladies do echo quilting? Echoing around patchwork, echoing around a design. It's a fantastic way, an easy way to practice your straight line walking foot quilting and or straight line ruler quilting. Many beginners start with straight line ruler quilting. And if you are still looking for a straight edge ruler, check out my YouTube channel. On a previous Quilt Conversations Live, I have a video that shares with you several of the straight edge rulers that I use and like, and why I like them and what I use them for. If you watch that video, you will learn which one might work for your type of straight line quilting, okay? Next, same panel. In the Essential Ruler Quilting Challenge, we had a circle ruler. But now I've taken that circle ruler and I said I want to stitch a fun design on the same panel. So learn the technique: ruler quilting, free motion quilting, walking foot quilting. Then you practice the technique on small quilt sandwiches. Then you take whatever other practice method that's small. And in my case, it's these panels. You can make your practice to be on an orphan quilt block, one quilt block, a table runner, a tote, whatever you want. Practice on a small quilt. When we do this, our confidence increases. We learn more of what we like and what we don't like. And this is the first one that we saw, right? All the same quilt panel, but quilted differently. Circles, squiggle designs, straight line designs. Hopefully by now you have gotten a hint about selecting a design based on what? Let us know in the chat. How do we select designs? What are the different ways that we can select a free motion quilting design? or a ruler quilting design or a walking foot design? I think I'm giving you all the answers. What are the ways we can choose a design for our quilt project? It's based on what skill we have, right? What we've taken time to learn. We can learn ruler quilting, but how many different rulers do you have? Do you like circles? Do you like squiggles? Do you like serpentine? Do you like clams? If you like clams, get a clamshell ruler and start learning how to use it. Take a class, then practice. If you have rulers and they're in the drawer, take them out. If you haven't used your walking foot lately, take it out and practice using the walking foot. If you are learning free motion quilting and you want to expand your skills, many of the ladies are in the alphabet design course where they are learning techniques to help them improve their free motion quilting and build their design library. The more designs you have under your belt, your go-to designs. If you haven't heard this phrase before, I love this expression because we're going to have designs that we're learning, that we want to learn, and designs that we know. So you should, at one point, my recommendation, have designs that you know, which are your go-to designs, designs that you're practicing. You're getting better, but they're not a go-to because you're not as confident. So you're going to continue to practice. There are designs that you're learning and designs that you want to learn. So at any of these stages, one is going to move to the next stage. So if you're practicing one, eventually it's going to become a go-to design. If you're learning one, it's going to move from being a learning design to one that you're practicing because you're getting better. Then if there's a design you want to learn, it's on your wish list, it's going to move from the wish list to your learning. And as you learn and get better, it's going to go to the practice level. From the practice level, it's going to be a go-to design. So you want to build your library of go-to designs, one design at a time. And how do you incorporate these in real quilts? My recommendation, this is what I do. I start with what I know. I know how to do X. I'm confident in it, and I can get the project done. If I can add a design that I'm practicing on a small scale, that helps me get that practice in, and slowly move it to and gradually move it to a go-to design because I know how to stitch it. Little by little, ladies. So I'm curious, how many of you ladies have 1, 2, 5? Let us know how many designs that you know, whether it's a ruler that you know how to use and you can quilt with it, a walking foot, you know how to do a crosshatch. How many designs do you know that you can stitch on a baby quilt today? Right? Let us know in the chat. So we have gone over, let's go back to our 10 steps. This is the Masterclass series. This series is reviewing the 10 steps to Stress Free Machine Quilting. And many of you know that is a course, the 10 steps. There are multiple videos, in-depth videos that talk about fabric preparation, piecing accuracy, tools for that, how to get the right seam allowance, how to set up your machine for that, pressing methods, pressing to one side, pressing tools, pressing techniques, batting selection. What are the different types of batting? Why would we choose one batting over another? Our basting method. Why does it matter to pin if you pin base in certain direction? What direction do we not want to pin? What about quilt stabilization? Why do we need that? And do we need it if we're using a certain type of machine? So today we talked about quilt design and density and placement, and how that is all connected to our batting choice, our skill level, what techniques and tools we have for the different things we can do with machine quilting. We didn't talk about hand quilting. I'm not a hand quilter, and if you are a hand quilter, I recommend you find an expert on that, someone who has more experience. I always say the expert is someone that has more experience than you that can help you go to the next level, right? If you want to learn more about hand quilting, find someone here on YouTube that can help you with that. Unfortunately, I'm not that one. I don't hand quilt. But that is another method, right? We can use stencils for hand quilting, but we can also use stencils for free motion. So that's how we can get designs. Where do designs come from? How do we learn designs for quilting, right? To add to our library, our go-to library. So next time we meet, ladies, we're going to talk about thread color, thread weight, and some practical ways that we can practice. Those are the two things we're going to cover next time. I'm so glad that we were together, even though I'm not live. I'm live in the chat, but this is recorded, and I didn't want us to miss this time. Now, if you are ready and you want to go deeper, and deeper means, to me, the next step. Wherever you are in your journey, the next step. What is the next step for you to help you make the quilts you want to make? It's your journey. My journey is not your journey or someone else's journey. So only you can evaluate where you are and where you want to go, right? But I want to help you if I can. And if I can help you, I do recommend you take the 10 Steps to Stress Free Machine Quilting course. Get the full in-depth training and instructions and tips and recommendations. Some you will use, some you will not. Some will be invaluable to you because you didn't know about thread weight and how to use thread weight in choosing a free motion quilting design and why you want to use a certain thread for stitching the ditch, or why you want to use a certain pressing method over another. This course was developed because of you. All the early adopters of Quilt Conversations Live, ladies who have been coming for a couple of years now, they asked me, Dina, Geraldine, how do you make your quilts? We were talking all about free motion quilting and ruler quilting in the beginning, but they wanted to know my full process. So I started to put together the series from beginning to end, and why the machine quilting process, whether it's walking foot, free motion, or ruler quilting, are all impacted from the very beginning. The quality of fabric, how we prepare the fabric, cut the fabric, piece the fabric, base the fabric, that all influences our experience with machine quilting. All right? So go take a look at that. Go to machinequilting.live to learn more about the course. And if part of your journey is to learn more designs for free motion quilting, consider the free motion alphabet course. You see the designs here? These are all from the course, and they're designs based on the alphabet. Something you already know. I help you with a multi-page guide. One, you learn the stitching path. Then once you learn the stitching path, you take that and you augment and change the path slightly to create more designs. Let's look at a couple examples. Let's see if I can find some. All right, here are a couple examples. We talked about this earlier, the letter O. I showed you several designs based on the letter O. I showed you a straight line design, a star-based designs with little O's on the end. We can connect O's in a straight line. We can do an edge to edge like this where we don't know where it's begun and where it ends. It can be O's connected to an L or O's connected to an S, right? Variations create interesting designs. What's next? Here is another one. This is still O's, but now it's connected to wavy lines or the letter S. It's still a meander pattern. We can change the scale of this to be big O's with big S's, or small or medium size. So the idea behind the alphabet course is to help you think about the shapes in the alphabet in a different way. And what letter do you see here? Do you see a box letter B or the letter D? What do you see, right? If you break it down based on the alphabet, what letter do you see? But this is a very modern edge-to-edge quilting that can easily be stitched. Does it have to be straight lines? No, it could be a wavy line between each of those boxed letter O's, right? We can make an O that is based on a square or rectangle, right? Hopefully you're inspired. And ladies who are in the alphabet course, hand in those assignments. I want to help you move to the next step in your free motion quilting journey. And you know you have to practice, right? You have to practice. What else? How about one more? Look at this. This is another meander pattern, but with triangles or the letter V or the letter A that has been closed off. You put 3 of those together and it looks like a star or a bow, right? Still based on the alphabet. So hopefully this has been inspirational and it's something that you can consider, right? So these are beginner designs, all based on the alphabet. Learn the stitching path, which is in the course. It's a handout. Then you get another packet with 50 designs that you can practice. Yes, and those are just the beginning, because you're supposed to start there, and one of the last assignments in the course is to create your own designs. Yes, and some ladies, because they have gone through the course step by step, are designing their own free motion quilting patterns. And I know you can too. I know that you can too. So, are you ready for the next step in your free motion quilting, ruler quilting, walking for quilting, or just quilting journey? I hope so. Let me know how I can help you in whatever step that is. Well, ladies, I'll see you next time for another Quilt Conversations Live. Thank you for spending time with me in the chat. It was fun to be there. And because this is recorded, I could not put your questions or comments on the screen, but I have been answering them in the chat. At least I hope so, because this is recorded. So I'm assuming that that's what I'm doing. So for those who are normally there, I'm going to say thank you for coming, Lori. Nice to see you, Marcia. Hello, Lorraine and Kimberly and Bernita. Thank you all for coming. And if I didn't say your name, it's not because I don't know that you're here, because I'm in the chat. I know you're here. I'll see you next time, ladies, for another Quilt Conversations Live.